Hello, everybody. This is Father Pete McCormick coming from Campus Ministry, and I am joined by my co-host of TLDR, Lynette Wookie. Lynette, welcome to the show. I'm so glad to be co-hosting this with you. As we get this thing going, are you excited about anything in particular?
I'm excited to talk to you, a big man on campus, and also I think TLDR is going to be an awesome way for everybody to just kind of be up on what's happening on campus with all the health regulations and everything, and ready to have a transparent conversation. And I think you're the perfect guy for it. So I'm excited.
So as we get this thing rolling, our first conversation and topic has been about surveillance testing. Right. I'll just riff on this on my life. I had never heard of surveillance testing before, I don't know, August of 2020. And when I began to hear about it, I was like, so how does this work? And Lord knows we had some experiences over it throughout the course of the fall semester. And, for in some people, in some cases, folks are really good about it. And perhaps others, it was maybe a little bit more of an inconvenience than they would have otherwise preferred. But today we're here to talk a little bit more about it. Love to hear about your experience right out of the gate.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of things I had never heard about before like March 2020. And so I think surveillance testing is definitely a big one. I actually got COVID at the beginning of the semester. So I wasn't in the surveillance testing for that 90 days that supposedly you are immune. I didn't get it again. So so far, so good. But there at the end of the semester, I was thrown back in the mix for the saliva testing, surveillance testing. And I know a lot of my friends kind of said it was a little bit inconvenient, but also they were really happy that they were doing something like that just to make sure they were healthy and make sure that they weren't spreading it, didn't know they had symptoms kind of thing. But did you get tested a bunch during last semester? Or?
Yeah, I was tested probably every other week, every third week, wow. Somewhere in there. For a while there, I remember counting, and I had something like 5 weeks in a row, and I would talk to other people and they would say, oh, I haven't been tested as much. And I thought somehow I was just put on the really high risk category, and maybe that
high risk, true. That's it. No, they just invited you back. They just wanted to see how you were doing.
So we are very blessed today to be joined by Dr. Mark Fox. And Dr. Fox has a variety of roles and has been instrumental in Notre Dame's approach to COVID over the course of the past semester. So a few things about Dr. Fox. One, he's the Deputy Health Officer for St. Joseph County. And secondly, he is also the Campus Dean of the IU School of Medicine here in South Bend. But most importantly, he's one heck of a great guy and so charitable in his approach and his expertise. And so, Dr. Fox, welcome. We have a principal question for you as we're thinking about this, which is, why is surveillance testing so important to us as a campus?
I think there are two reasons why it's important. One is because we know, we've learned a lot about COVID over the last year, and we know that 40% of cases will be asymptomatic, and that people are at risk of spreading the virus even when they're asymptomatic, or especially in that period before they develop symptoms. And so the importance of surveillance testing when people don't have any symptoms at all is really to identify those individuals who are infected and either have not yet shown symptoms or aren't ever going to show symptoms. So it helps reduce the transmission. The second piece is, on a college campus, any congregate living setting, it becomes really important to limit the transmission. And so it's important to have access to testing for, diagnostic testing for people who are sick and have symptoms. That was kind of the first priority, but really the beauty or the strength of the approach to COVID response is to identify those opportunities to limit transmission, and surveillance testing in a congregate living setting is really key to doing that.
So as a student, I'm kind of wondering, and we're hearing that surveillance testing is going to be different, going to be every week now. Can you kind of explain why that is, why we're looking at surveillance testing differently this semester, and why they're kind of creating a harsher reaction if you're not getting your surveillance test, if you're not showing up each week?
Yeah, the university was challenged at a couple different points in the fall semester. So obviously in August, with the initial campus outbreak, The only screening that was being done was for student athletes. The plans were in the works for the bigger surveillance testing program, but it wasn't implemented yet. Fortunately, the university got that set up and implemented pretty quickly. And so it did offer benefit in the fall semester. By the end of the fall semester, about 60% of the cases that were identified on campus were identified by surveillance testing.
Wow.
So it really did have an impact on limiting transmission across the university community. If you look around the country, the places that have really set up very successful and aggressive surveillance testing programs tend to be schools that have vet schools attached to them, because they convert one of the vet labs into a saliva surveillance testing facility, and they're able to do, there's some schools that are testing every 3 days or every 5 days or something. So an even more aggressive schedule. I don't remember what the exact pace was, at the end of the fall semester, but there was testing kind of between Halloween and Clemson, and then there was exit testing. So it wasn't quite every week, but it was getting close toward the end as the capacity in the lab built up. The real challenge is that from the time you're infected until you show symptoms tends to be about 5 or 6 days. So if I could wave a magic wand and make it happen, I would have everyone tested every 5.5 days. So from your exposure, we would identify you before you develop symptoms. So, I think the once a week strategy gets pretty close to that. And again, the goal is to identify people even before they develop symptoms, and hopefully before they begin spreading to their roommate or people they're hanging out with.
Yeah, absolutely. And that kind of brings up another question for me for the changes. I know there's a little bit of different pre-matriculation process. So why did we decide to change that instead of, I know first semester they sent out the tests, we sent them back. Was it logistics? What was kind of I know that it was hard to kind of get everybody to ship them back 24 hours within getting them kind of thing. So is that kind of the thought process behind that? Or I know that I'm just a little curious for those kind of changes.
Yeah, I think there were several factors. One, Notre Dame was probably one of the first institutions to commit to doing pre-matriculation testing in the fall. And, thanks to the leadership team, they worked with LabCorp to set that up so that people got tested before they arrived on campus. And I think the intent of that was absolutely right on. You wanted to exclude people from campus, who you knew to be infected, but because of, how far the tests were traveling and everything, the window of time before returning to campus probably was too broad. And while it eliminated some people, there still was a huge outbreak, a couple of weeks later. So I think it was that window of time wasn't narrow enough to have the kind of impact that was intended. So now we fast forward, the saliva lab is up and running, the capacity and the turnaround time are phenomenal. And so the opportunity to test people, as they arrive in South Bend or as they arrive on campus and get a result by 8 or 9 o'clock the next morning, really changes what's possible, I think. So whereas, if you send it to LabCorp and send a nasal swab like you did before the fall semester, the turnaround time on that was 2 or 3 days, under good circumstances. So that's a lot longer period, of potential exposure there. So the capacity in the saliva lab and the turnaround time are really favorable for doing this, except that I think it's really important that students understand one really critical key to this is when you come to campus and from the time you spit until you have a result, your bubble needs to be really, really, really small. I mean, you should be a hermit for those 12 to 24 hours to reduce the risk of transmission to anyone else. So Zoom, talk to people on the phone, do whatever, but really it's for this to work, people really have to be committed to limiting the risk of transmitting or exposing anyone else until they have a negative result from their arrival testing.
That answered a lot of my curiosities and questions. So thank you.
Dr. Fox, I just want to offer a testimonial here for a minute. There were a variety of things that I got over Christmas break, and one of them was COVID. And I had the benefit of actually being caught via surveillance testing. So I was testing with Hoops, and it was interesting because I tested on a Friday and tested positive, and then Saturday morning, I received a phone call from the university informing me that I tested positive. But later that day, I had a series of commitments that I had made, a baptism, and a series of other kind of meetings with people where, of course, I would have worn a mask. But to have the benefit of a university community that not only provided surveillance testing, but then also afforded me the chance to really genuinely look out for the community in which I was in, was so deeply appreciated. So I think about the surveillance testing opportunity that we have, and I realize that at times it can be difficult because it may not necessarily align with our schedules, or it becomes repetitive, and we think that we already know what the result's going to be. But I can say from having personal experience over the course of the past couple of weeks, by the way, that it is so helpful and beneficial to allow us as the Notre Dame community to genuinely be authentically ourselves. So as I think about maybe transitioning to a close here, Dr. Fox in particular, do you have any kind of final points that you would want to make to the Notre Dame student body as we get ready to get rolling for spring 2021?
Yeah, I think, the Notre Dame community made it through a fall semester that was at times challenging. And we're in a very different place now than we were in the fall. We know a lot more about the virus. The testing capacity is much different, but really the key to a successful semester and continuing in person and everything is the students' engagement in following the mitigation strategies, committing to doing the testing. Those are the things that will keep the campus community safe and in person.
Thank you so much. Lynette, how about for you? Any final points or questions you want to raise?
I don't think I have any more questions, but definitely I want to thank you, Dr. Fox, for keeping our community safe, especially as a student and a senior. It means a lot to me to be able to be back on campus with my fellow Irish. So I just want to thank you, and I'm ready to get my surveillance test every week.
So maybe as we get ready,
testing center, and I feel like my parotid glands just puff up, and it's like Pavlov or something.
They're ready. They know.
As we get ready to close this first session of TLDR, we are so honored to have Dr. Fox with us. And speaking on behalf of Lynette, she and I are so very excited for kind of these weekly drops, and we're excited to see what future guests we're going to have on and what kind of interesting conversations we're hoping to have. So thanks so much for your attention, and take care, everybody. Go Irish.